Welcome to another episode This Week in Metropolis. I'm Matt.
And I'm the number one fan of DC. This week on the show, we are joined by the host of Late to the Game podcast, Ellie. She is a huge gaming fan. On the show, we talk about our favourite games of the 90s. We talk about last week's E3 and what games stood out to us. And we also go into depth on one of Ellie's favourite games, Disco Elysium.
But before we get into the episode, make sure, just to show us how much you love us, no other reason than that, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, comment, message us, slide into our DMs, whatever you need to do, really. We're easy with that sort of stuff. We love every single bit of feedback we get, and it's great to reach out and speak to all of you. So hope you enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to This Week in Metropolis.
Okay, welcome to another episode. Are we recording, Matt?
Yeah, we are.
Recording. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Metropolis. We are delighted to be joined this week by the host of Late to the Game podcast, Ellie. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you guys?
Very well, thank you. Very well. How are you?
I'm doing swell, just great.
Great. Well, that's what we like. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. As I just mentioned, you are the host of Late to the Game podcast. You're also the co-host of Just a Fault podcast as well.
That is correct.
So a fellow podcaster. We always like to get other podcasters on the show. Tell us, for those that aren't aware, we've obviously caught up on some of your work, but for those that don't know who you are or aware of you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, long story short, there was a global pandemic. I don't know if you guys know.
We heard something about it.
Yeah.
Just in passing.
Yeah, so when that really started kicking off, I was at the end of getting a master's in literature and publishing. And then, world blew up, couldn't get a job. And so I decided to pursue a line in gaming and more in the line of narrative design in video games. And off the back of that, I was doing Twitch streams and things like that. And like you guys, my partner, I just wanted to talk to him about games, and I wanted an excuse to do that for a solid hour. So I was like, let's make a podcast. And so it's kind of transpired from there. But the Just a Thought podcast is actually it's a bookish podcast. So my best friend and I, we talk about a lot of books on there. And I hesitate about the type of book that I say it is. A lot of it is romance, which is something that has surprised both of us. But, the community lovingly calls the stuff that we read fairy porn. So,
And that's an interesting niche.
yeah, it's very specific. I think we'll
Sounds
be moving.
magical.
It is.
It is.
There's actually, there's that part of the romance of it that is quite funny. But there's also there's a substantial amount of really good plot. But all of it's weirdly written for YA. It's very confusing.
Can I just say, that sounds like, when a man will say, I read Playboy for the stories.
Yeah.
Or for the articles. And that sounds like that sort of excuse for your fairy porn.
I'm not going to make an excuse. I like the porn part of it too. But I will say that it actually does have genuinely good storyline. But back to gaming.
You started this.
I know. I just felt like I needed to be honest because it is a public podcast. But yes, so I have been pursuing narrative design in video games and working on the networking part of that. But man, I've got one hell of a portfolio to build before I can even really apply for proper games jobs. So that's where I'm at the moment. And that's what I do. I write.
Do you think though, many years ago, I used to recruit from the games industry. And one thing I worked in the area of art and animation.
Great.
But one thing that they, put all the studios and all the producers of these games and that, what they always wanted was a portfolio of some sort, and you sort of mentioned it there. But it was the case of, if you want to be a game artist, just do art, you know, draw. Come in with what you can actually draw. Don't necessarily have to put it towards gaming as such, but just show us your creativity. And there was, you know, in other areas, I remember there was a person who'd set up a fan site for, what's it called? Little Big Planet, wasn't it?
Sure, okay.
And I think someone was going for a game for a community sort of manager or something, and they got put onto the job because they put a fan site together online. Cool. And I think, you know, do you think it's more accessible? Like, how do you feel looking for work in the industry? Do you feel that doing your Twitch and doing your podcast and that, do you think that puts you in a good position in terms of a career? Do you have more opportunity, I guess, is what I'm saying, from that point of view?
I'd say, so Twitch, not necessarily will be like, you know, the thing that gets me the job, but it is something that's the most direct way that I am in contact with my like community, and that is the most direct way that I can be like, hey, I've written a piece, you should go to my website. And so by having that kind of like human contact, it gives a face to the writer rather than just always being like, hey, can you like go to my website, maybe read stuff that I write. And then in terms of creating the portfolio and everything, I just personally have set a wider time span on it, because I'm so, throughout my life, I've so often just been like, you know what, here's the next big thing, and I just like throw myself into it. But this, I feel like I could find a very like a long and fulfilling career out of it. And so I want to give myself the time to self-educate and to get comfortable with the portfolio that I create. And as well, because I want to get into narrative design, I need to just show that I can create games, whether that's on Twine or Inky or whatever it is, and you know, just in Unity, and just to actually build those games myself and to feel comfortable sitting in that time before I'd have to actually do like a crunch if I were in a job being a narrative designer. So I think they're all piecemeal ways of getting to that greater goal. And at the moment I'm employed for like a wedding company, but I write about baby names and babies, but it's just, you know, like, it's just proof I am a writer. I have been doing this professionally for, you know, X amount of time. So that all contributes, I think. I think it's pretty approachable, even if it is a very competitive field.
Definitely. How does it fit with you, in that you mentioned sort of Twine and Unity and those sort of things? How does it fit for you with between like a creative and a technical standpoint? Do you embrace both, or from the technical side, is that a bit more, or I know I've got to do it as such, but
okay, so real talk. I am not technologically inclined, but you have never met a more determined motherfucker. Like, I will not understand technology whenever I first do it, but you cannot possibly stop me until I do. So in my narrative design course that I took, because I actually just did like a 6 to 10 week program, I'm not sure what it was, studying narrative design in video games, and with that he had us creating games on Twine and Unity and those platforms, just to get comfortable with it, so that we were equipped to speak the language whenever we go into writers' rooms, you know?
And it's a tool, I guess, as well.
Absolutely,
in a sense,
and to just know, like, to know the difference between like the requests I might make, be like, okay, for this narrative purpose, I need this thing to happen, but then I have a budget that's quite small, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that wasn't possible on this budget. Whereas now I would have a much more fully
you understand the bigger picture, don't you, I guess?
Yes, thank you.
So what I want to know is, where did it all begin, your love for gaming?
Okay, so when I was a wee bub, I got into playing like Harvest Moon on PlayStation 1 or something with my cousins, which then, you know, changed to playing on like the Game Boy and GameCube and all that stuff, and like Animal Crossing. those kinds of things. And there was also like, the random Tony Hawk and James Bond. And like, I absolutely loved those games. And then through my bachelor's degree and my master's, I like did not game at all. Like, I was just fully immersed in my studies. And so after getting the master's and everything, I was like, you know what? This is the time. I'm going to go back and make up for all that lost time, which is why my brand is called Late to the Game, because I'm playing everything that everyone has already played. But I'm like, it's amazing. Did you guys know about this indie game called God of War?
Well, that's really cool, though, that you are appreciating the stuff. And I think now, I mean, me and Matt talk about it quite a bit, because Matt's an Xbox fan, I'm a PlayStation fan, and Matt raves to me about Game Pass and how he's playing all these older games. I mean, Matt, you can talk about some of the ones you recently got. You recently got a Tony Hawk's, didn't you?
Yeah, so I recently bought the Tony Hawk 1 and 2, which was sort of the remaster of the original games, which I'd never, like you, I'd never played them first time around. I thought, oh, that looks interesting, having played other skating games. I think it's great that you've got now, and I think we were talking about this a couple of episodes ago, that older games now are quite accessible, with backwards compatibility and things like that. Whereas before you'd have to buy a specific console to play a specific game. Whereas now you can, like this week on Epic Store on the PC, now we're giving away Sonic Mania, I think it is.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah.
There's a game that I've never played before, and I can access that on something that I've got now. And a lot of the old games stand up like, I think, the comparison is movies. You wouldn't think twice about watching an old movie, would you?
Right.
And, gaming has reached that platform now as a medium where we should be looking back. Because
there's something to look back on now. Like,
exactly.
It's such a young industry.
Yeah.
But it's been so flooded, like, since the beginning, that I think we've really... I don't know. We're all a bit privileged to be looking at the games industry, because it's like, oh my God, can you believe what they did with, like, The Last of Us, how they're remastering The Last of Us, I think part 2 maybe, and it came out on PS4.
And it's not that old, is it?
No, it is like so new, and they're like, but we're gonna redo it, and it's and people like, I don't know. We're just a lot of snobs, because we can be, because the content is regularly delivered. So I think looking back is really important.
But I think with, like James said about the Xbox, though, the one experience I'm having, like, there's a game, Skate 3, which I had when it came out, and that was 2010, I think. It was on the 360 maybe. And that's now on Game Pass, but that's remastered. But it's great because you've got the latest console playing the game you're very familiar with. And it's probably not, it's old enough to still look good at the time, but it now just looks better. Do you know what I mean? You're not changing it, you're just like giving it a polish.
Yeah, definitely.
It's the best way to describe it now. I quite like that. It's not like George Lucas ruining Star Wars. It's, that's a different thing as such. But.
Do your boys, Matt, are they, the eldest is 11 or 12, isn't he?
It's 13 this year.
13 nearly, right. So
13.
Are they...
Wow.
I'm wondering whether it's a generational thing, because are they interested in these older games, or is it because we're of a certain age where we're now looking back at them?
Now we're old.
Now we're old.
We're reminiscing of the good old days.
I can speak to that as well once you answer.
No, they do to a certain extent, but I think it's a harder sell. The age they're at, I think that they tend to look at the new and the shiny, things more. Yeah. But saying that, I mean, both of them will regularly play Minecraft. And you think Minecraft is now 12 years old, maybe, something like that. Which James tried to play today and failed by all accounts.
I don't understand Minecraft. I feel old, like, thinking about it. Like, I don't know why I don't get it.
It was hurting my brain, Ellie. I won't lie to you. My little boy is coming up to 5, and after playing a couple of games, which he was quite comfortable with, Matt said to me, "Oh, you should get him on Minecraft." And then I've been a bit reluctant to, because I don't like particularly don't like the look of Minecraft. I think it is obviously it's designed the way that it is. And we started playing it today, and it's just really hurting my brain, especially when I'm transferring from playing kind of Assassin's Creed at the moment to Minecraft. Yeah, two very different bodies.
Just think of it as Lego.
Which Assassin's Creed?
Say that again, sorry.
Which Assassin's Creed are you playing?
Valhalla.
Okay, how do you feel?
It's long. That's how I feel about it. I mean,
it's the only takeaway.
It's incredible. Don't get me wrong. And this is the first Assassin's Creed I've ever played.
Oh, play different ones.
I'm notorious.
Play Odyssey and Origins. That's what I've heard.
I'm notorious for being a bit of a one-trick pony, and I play FIFA, and that's about it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So since I got my PS5, I've made the well, actually, it was the latter end of me having a PS4. I played The Last of Us and absolutely loved it.
Right.
So I was like, I need to start playing other games now. We need to have a break.
You need to branch out.
Yeah. It's not you, it's me. And I've been playing. You know, me and my boy played Spider-Man, and now we've got Miles Morales. So we are playing different games, and yeah, it's Assassin's Creed Valhalla visually is stunning, absolutely stunning. But it is just a bit of a slog, really. It's quite long.
It does not pick up, from what I know.
I've died a lot.
It's probably about 200 hours long as well.
Yeah, it is,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, my partner, he plays. I think he played around 120 hours. Got to the ending and was just like, oh. He was like, oh, okay. But the DLC is really good, apparently.
Okay. Maybe I'll just get that and just play that part.
Yeah, I think it's only like you have to be like level 55 or something to play the Irish DLC, and it's 13 hours, so it's just like a concise game experience, which it should, AC should move more towards.
What you was going to add some bit towards the younger generation with older games. What you?
Yeah, so my stepson is 10, and he is like very into video games right now, and he actually he was able to borrow a PlayStation 1 from one of his teachers at school, and then from that point he was like, right? And because it was like the one console that he didn't actually have at home, and so he was like, I need to do this, and it, like he did it for like a school project or something. It was really cool. But he is now like wanting to collect, like vintage games. And he's been very into that, and he's also been like playing a lot of Wii games recently, which is, it feels bizarre to say that that's kind of vintage, but it isn't an outdated system at this point.
Well, it came out in 2004 or something like that, I think, the Wii, didn't it? It's
oh my God.
Quite old now. Yeah
Wow.
But there's some great games on that.
Totally, yeah.
It? Absolutely amazing.
And a very like bizarre way of playing as well. I remember having Skyward Sword on Wii, and I was just like, how does this work?
We spoke about this before as well, Matt. I think with how other consoles. I mean, I'd forgotten, but I think we actually spoke to another Ellie Gibson who came on the show, and she pointed out that obviously PlayStation, they had their own kind of hand remote thing with a camera and all that. Xbox have got their own one, haven't they? So I just don't think any of them stood out as much as the Wii, though, for some reason. Even though the Wii is, I mean, I remember my housemate having a Wii, and you could just sit on the sofa and not make any effort whatsoever.
Right.
Just like this. And that was it to do your bowling.
But you still knew epic stories of people breaking their TVs with the Wii because they were too cocky for the wrist strap. So I think that's probably the legacy it had to live on. Like, I think that's why people were like, oh, we know the Wii.
Someone's still got a scar that they got from it.
One of the things you mentioned on your bio is that you're currently gaming, I assume you're still currently gaming, Disco Elysium.
I am.
Which, when I asked Matt about it, as I say, I'm not a, FIFA, that used to be the way. That would be what mine would label if I was still playing it. But I asked Matt, and Matt was familiar with it, so I looked it up and watched a little trailer. I was like, wow, this is incredible.
Absolutely.
It's a really cool game. Can you tell me what you love about it?
Oh gosh. The writing.
Where do I begin?
Yeah, I mean, it is like if any of your listeners are wondering what the hell I talked about for 5+ minutes when I was talking about narrative design, this is what I'm talking about. The narrative design for Disco Elysium is just, oh my God, beyond reason, so good. And it clearly was just a small team got together. They had a boss ass writer and they had a person with vision, and they're like, okay, put those hands together. We're making a game. Because it's very interesting because you play the character of a detective, and throughout your entire process you are getting it's not just inner monologue like you're talking to yourself. It's there are different characters called Inland Empire, or one of them is Horrific Necktie, and all of these it's just this giant existential crisis for this detective, but the pacing is so brilliant in the way that it will deliver. It gives you jokes when you clearly need to breathe. Yeah. It tackles race theory at the same time that it will Horrific Necktie will come up and be like, hey, you should do this. And it tries to. There are certain it's got a D&D element to it as well. So there are roles and fails and successes on rolls and everything. And there are different aspects of your psyche that will come in and try to convince you to do different things. Right. And that configures your gameplay. And all of this is delivered through this just really incredible detective story. And having to solve a crime. And this one thing, I think it only takes place over a couple days in gameplay. I think it's a 20-hour game. So it's short enough, but the writing is just magnificent. And the people that create it clearly had an idea of the real people version of psychology and philosophy. And it's just, it's so good.
There's something like that, sort of going back to your sort of personal writing and creativity. Do you find you sort of experience something like that, and then are you inspired creatively to then go and do your own work?
100%. Yes, absolutely. Because there's just something about, and I'm sure with your artistry backgrounds, I'm sure when you see a particularly compelling image, you're like, oh, what if I did something like that? Or what if I took this technique and did it this way? And so when I just read magnificent writing in the game world, then there's something in me where I'm just oh my God, what if I could do that? I could do something like that. And especially because the way the game is portrayed, it genuinely looks because it's a point and click game, in case you didn't know, James. And so the way that you play it is very much 2D, well, not 2D-ish images, and beautiful art style, and you just go through
really nice,
finding all of these bits and pieces of the story, and so to see something like that and know that I could in a couple years create something like that is really, really compelling for me, for sure.
Definitely. That reminds me of we had a guest on a few weeks back, Andy Robertson, who is the author of a book and a website. It's a database called Taming Gaming.
Cool.
And it's aimed at kind of parents, really, as a kind of, it's almost how would you describe it, Matt? An educating parents on.
It's a directory of different games and giving parents advice on, is this game suitable as such, in terms of the content and the age range and so on, but also it aims to educate people who would conventionally think gaming is not for me, or I've never played a game, to show that, well, actually, a bit like you was talking about that game, there are so many sides to gaming. It's not just shooting things, it's not just
absolutely
driving a car. There's so much more depth and nuance to a lot of these things.
And you don't like gaming is the same thing as saying you don't like cinema. You just clearly haven't found the thing that you liked in it. It's such a broad, sweeping statement, and you're just you're probably just wrong.
That's true.
The game that he referred to, I think, was a point and click game, which was the refugee one, Matt, if you remember.
I can't remember what that was called.
Husband and wife are a refugee, and they're trying to escape from
God, that's devastating.
Wherever it was.
Yeah.
And it's like, and he said that's one of the games that he'll point parents in to say, like, you know, this is completely not what you're expecting for a video or a game. And he said it gives you have to make the decisions and all this sort of thing, and it leads, obviously there's different paths that it leads down. And he said it also gave him kind of a bit of an education on the matter as well. So when he's watching the news and sees about refugees on boats, he said he like started getting welled up because he's got a better understanding through this game than he had. And again, like we said, there's more to games. I know there's some that obviously, you know, you're not going to get moved by Street Fighter, or Matt might do, but
I get moved by Street Fighter.
But at the same time, there are games that are a little bit more deeper than just a FIFA. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely going to look into this Disco Elysium. It sounds again, from watching it, this is another thing. Like the artwork in it is incredible, and there's something about that. And me and Matt, and we'll talk about it a little bit when we talk about E3 shortly. Side-scrolling games and things like that now, where advancement in gaming has gone so far. It's amazing that a side-scrolling game now looks so much better and more appealing, and you just think, I want to play that game. It's incredible. I think artwork's very key. Definitely.
And I think there's also, because side-scrolling used to be side-scrolling out of necessity, whereas now it can be stylized, and so the side-scrolling can be like diagonal scrolling. Like you can hint at a field of depth, whereas before you wouldn't have been able to. But yeah, I mean, the art style, oh my god, is so good. Like it's just, I don't know. There's just something about the very raw brush strokes that you can find in all of the painted parts of the game. It's just this weird little artistic masterpiece, and I think everyone deserves to know about it.
Yeah. No, I agree. Well, listen, while we're talking about art styles, because I think this is quite a good crossover here, we'll just step away from gaming for a second, because you tweeted something yesterday, and we're recording today. What's the date today? I don't even know. It's the 25th of June. You tweeted something yesterday about Loki.
I did.
Now, I'm assuming you're a fan of the MCU in general.
I am.
Yeah, amazing. Aren't we all?
Yeah, I was about to say that. Can you imagine if I said no when you were wearing a Marvel
Could you imagine
t-shirt?
if I said no?
Well, we would just hit stop record.
We're like, we're done.
And that's it. Yeah,
End.
we'll do the outro. Yeah.
To refer to your tweet, you said that you felt Loki couldn't be any more subpar.
I mean,
something along that line.
You're taking some liberties on that.
You said this is disgrace. Let's put it out there.
No, I said that Loki at the moment is subpar, and if it continues to be subpar, I feel I can comfortably blame it on the original poster design, and I stand by that.
Now, the original poster design.
Yes.
Have I not seen this?
Explain. What's the
Well, okay, so the original poster design for this show specifically, I'm sure there's tons of Loki posters, but okay.
Is it just that logo with the different fonts and things like that?
I mean, it's the logo, and it also just looked like this weird clip art amalgamation of imagery. It was
clip
absolutely.
Art is always a good starting point.
It was trash. It was a horrible poster, and I know that people stuck up for it, and they were like, oh, it's supposed to denote chaos. And I'm like, you can do chaos in a beautiful way. It doesn't have to be hideous. And this one really hideous. And even just in the because in the show, and I have to wonder if it is because of the backlash that they got on the poster, but in the show, in the title sequence, they make the Loki, they still have the insane series of fonts that they use for the 4 letters, but they did it in black and white, and it's far less offensive in black and white.
Yeah.
And so it did make me wonder about that.
Do you know what? You're right, though. Now I think about the ending, it is, even when they're moving them fonts about it, I thought you was on about the actual kind of, I've seen the posters now with the logo, and I don't think that necessarily looks bad, but there's a huge difference. It does look, like you say, it's like someone cut the letters out.
Totally, it's serial killer style. Yeah, it's serial killer note style letters. It's disgusting. And the reason that I feel that I can blame the show being somewhat subpar on that poster is because like the same, like, I mean, he's the god of mischief. He is chaos, but there is a way to do that in a nuanced and beautiful way. And you have Tom Hiddleston who can act the hell out of this role, but the writing is just like, and the plot is just really presumptuous in terms of the leaps that it can make. And so I feel very comfortable relating it back to that original poster design. I feel like we all knew what was going to happen when I saw that design, and I was like, who said this was okay? Who looked at this? It was like, this is what we should put out.
Well, saying that, the actual, because I've watched 1.5 episodes.
Right.
Because the reason for the half is my internet went wrong halfway through. Right. And then it just didn't, we didn't watch it anymore.
It said that no more.
But I felt the same. And I was sitting there sort of thinking, yeah, I'm supposed to be enjoying this.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm working a little bit hard. But the only thing that kept me watching was stylistically, I think the show is beautiful. Like that blend of, you can tell it's meant to be sort of high tech and meant to be futuristic, but it's done in a very, like the oranges and the browns are in a very 70s sense.
Yeah,
and the displays are, very similar. And I love the like the educational sort of film that he was watching at the beginning, the style of that, and I think they've absolutely nailed that. That is, it is eye candy, but it just sort of trudges along. Sort of in terms of story, and
I feel that way. I had that kind of issue with WandaVision as well. Like, I think WandaVision in general is superior to this show as it stands for sure. But there's just like, I don't know, a lot of resting on their laurels when it comes to being like, we're Marvel, we can do whatever we want kind of thing. Because like the writing, it's just, there's a lot of presumption for sure. Like there's these giant leaps made and they're like, oh, but of course we did this because we're the best scientists in the world. And it's just like, I mean, like, could you maybe give me some like real background just like on something?
And you're right there, because the whole point of putting it into a series, I mean, me and Matt probably discussed this on an earlier show, but I questioned whether I would want to go to the cinema to see WandaVision if it was a standalone 2.5-hour movie.
Right. Loki,
the same. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. They're the kind of side cast. They're they're not the main Avengers. Do you know what I mean? So I think putting it in a series gives Marvel the opportunity to build that background story, to put that emphasis on what's going on.
Definitely.
Speaking on the current show that we started on, I felt episodes 1 and 2, and specifically, I don't want to spoil anything for Matt, but I felt that where Matt probably finished on the halfway through the first episode, the second half was where it picked up for me, especially that ending. Right. And I was at the end of that second episode, I was like, I cannot wait for the next one. And the third one just really underwhelmed for me. Yeah. Visually, it was amazing.
You're so right.
It's too cheesy. It's too corny. That's not what I expect of Loki. To me, he's a villain. He's not a joker. Like, he can have a bit of humour. I'm all down for a bit of humour. That's what Marvel love to do. But for me, and again, I don't want to spoil too much for Matt, but
don't worry, I might never watch it.
I'll never watch it.
You mean after these glowing reviews, you're not going to watch it?
It's really hard, because what I want to do, and there was a point in Captain America, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where I felt pretty much the same, and I just thought, but I trust Marvel. I trust that they're going to bring it down.
That's what it is. That's what they're absolutely abusing, the trust that the people have built in them. Like, they've got like 35 main Marvel like movies.
Oh,
so there's people that are like invested. They will watch this even if they don't like it. And so I feel like it's become the grounds for a lot of experimentation. But with Loki, the personality, I've said this word 90 times, but the personality that they're giving him could be so much more nuanced. Like, he is the most clever of the bunch, And
Yeah.
like, and you can make him more unabashedly evil. Like, he's not supposed to be good. And
No.
I think we have an issue, especially at the moment, where we try to we try to shift away really hard from binary focus, but in comics you can get away with that. Like, he could just be evil, you know?
Yeah.
You could make us love him because we love to hate him. It doesn't have to be like, oh, he's actually a sweetheart, he's got a heart of gold. It's like, no, he's literally the god of mischief. Like, he can just be bad.
And that was his place, though. If you think in the films, it was, you know, Thor's a good guy, Loki isn't. And,
Right.
and that, you know, and that was the balance that worked, wasn't
and
it?
that's it. And I just feel like they're moving away from that, especially in this third episode. I felt like they really dropped the ball a bit with it. I'm intrigued to see where it goes. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to drop out like Matt is.
I know, this is the thing. Like, I have put my trust in Marvel. I probably will watch it. Like,
Yeah.
How many episodes are there?
6.
6.
Oh yeah, I'm
It's not-
halfway
it's not
through.
too
I can
bad.
definitely do the
But,
rest.
but that's another thing as well, Ellie. Like, we're halfway through, and I feel like there's still a hell of a lot to get through.
You're so right. Yeah.
Episode
And
6 is
It's
going to
been
be
a lot of
ridiculous.
preamble. It's been a lot of preamble, and it's now starting to be like, oh, here's the problem-solving part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But we'll see how that goes, and we'll keep an eye on your tweets on that.
My scathing, like, casual reviews.
Well, also on Twitter, while we're talking about Twitter, we threw out there, and we did on Instagram as well, and we'll do this for future guests. So if you are listening or watching, make sure you get involved. We asked if anyone had any questions for you, and we've got a question from @MuscleNerd3, aka Rico. I'm not going to do the other AKA because I think Rico's enough. It's awesome.
It's a long name, yeah.
He wants to know your most loved or hated function of a game or character skill.
Okay. I have a two-part answer, if I may.
Of course.
Okay. So one of my favorite functions in any game ever, is the recall action on Kratos' axe in God of War 2018. I think that is like mind-boggling. For some reason, having that like that gravitas and like the rumble of the controller when you have retrieved the axe, and then like, or if you time it particularly well and like you manage to retrieve it and it goes through an enemy, lands in your hand, and you go like, ah, you know, and put it back in. Like, I think that is one of the most masterful functions, game mechanics.
Sounds awesome.
It's, oh my God, James, have you not played God of War 2018?
No.
That is next. You have to.
It's actually...
Oh, and you've got a little boy as well. You're gonna lose it. It's so good. Oh my God.
I think it's free on PlayStation Plus as well. I think I can do
There you go. You got no excuse.
Yeah.
Please do it and report every single step to me. It is one of my favorite games of all time.
Okay.
And then another function that I absolutely adored beyond all reason was the battle mechanics in Final Fantasy VII Remake. The way, have either of you played it? Because you're an Xbox man, so I don't think you would have played it.
No.
Right.
No.
And you're a FIFA man, so you haven't played it. So it mashes the idea of JRPG with real-time action. And so it's got the turn-based combat sort of in the way that you would have a menu system that you can navigate through. And while you're navigating through that, the action is happening still, but it's happening in slow motion. So you're getting this like slow motion cinematography while something might be like leaping at you or whatever, and you're trying to find the next action that you want to use against this opponent. And there's just something so gratifying about being able to do those premeditated, very specific actions, that it just makes it really powerful. And I think the reason they were able to accomplish that kind of feeling is because, like, you know, like, I mean, in Tekken, you know, if you want to talk about like fucking beat 'em ups or something, you can do, you know, various control combinations, like button combinations, in order to get certain moves. But with this, obviously that wouldn't have been, you know, an attainable feat, because with each new weapon that you get, there would have been a whole other series of things. So they're able to accomplish that kind of level of intricacy in the moves by giving you these menu systems. And I think that's so cool. Like, I'm very, very into all of the combat in Final Fantasy VII Remake.
That does sound really cool, actually. And
It's amazing.
There are a few. I mean, one that springs to my mind, and you saying about recall, not for the same reason, but Forza map, which obviously you've got on the latest Xbox. But when I did own an Xbox for a very short period of time, I had a Forza. I can't remember what one it was, but I love the fact that you can recall, as in rewind, as such.
Yeah.
It feels like cheating, but at the same time,
See, that's what I
not.
was going to say. I've never decided whether I've liked that or not. You know, because it just doesn't feel. I feel like I'm being lazy. You know, I'm replacing skill with just rewinding because I missed a corner.
You're learning.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should leave that in the middle ground of loved or hated function.
Yeah.
What have you got, Matt?
Well, there's a few, and so for one thing, I was saying to James earlier, one thing I hate particularly about Nintendo games is I'll switch it on and I think, right, I want to get into this, and there is so much dialogue written on the screen beforehand. It seems whenever I play a Nintendo game, it's, you know, whether it's Mario or anything, it's, you know, Toad say this and blah 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 and blah blah blah, and then press A and blah 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 and blah 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 and then press A. And I'm sure they do it just because to localize text is a lot easier than doing it for speech. So, you know, they just stick it all in. Sometimes I just want to play in a game, you know. I just want
Sometimes I don't want exposition.
No, exactly. Who cares? I just want to jump on that, you know. That's all it is. But I guess the other things, me being an absolute bore about Street Fighter, is sort of the fact that I've got Street Fighter 2 on arcade, and it cheats, and it's well known that it cheats completely. And there are certain, if you're beating a particular character, a character will grab or do a move that it wouldn't be able to do if you was a real player, basically. Yeah. So you're about to do something, it does a throw and like not so much of the energy.
Is that a hated or loved function for you?
Oh, that's definitely hate, yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were like admiring how like clever it was.
No, not all. You're just about to win. You're like, come on, you know, I couldn't have done that. It's ridiculous. But the love of that game is the whole tactical element, you know, in the fact that they pioneered beat 'em ups really with Street Fighter 2, and just the fact that all of the characters are different and all the characters have their individual strengths, and once you learn those, whether you're playing against a person or playing against the CPU, incredible. You know, it's tactical. It almost turns it into a, you know, sort of a tactical game, like a chess game rather than so that element I absolutely geek out on. I love that.
And we must point out as well that you have been recently studying how to be as good as Justin Wong.
Well, I'm trying, but I have got various books about Street Fighter, which is incredibly sad, but
I don't think that's sad at all. I think that's very cool. I don't know anything about Street Fighter, and I would love for an info dump.
Okay, like that one.
Show and tell.
But it's ridiculous, yeah. So how much you can. I've always been quite casual in terms of gaming, and but it's incredible now how much just. When you learn how much people put into like the mechanics of a game or whatever,
absolutely,
and you start going down that rabbit hole, you just think, wow, how have I never noticed this before? Because you go from just bashing some buttons and trying to work your way through it, but once you actually master something and start getting to that level, wow, you know, you get so much more out of it. No matter what the game is, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, one of the games you mentioned there, Ellie, was Final Fantasy VII
Remake,
which leads us nicely into this.
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on again. My question this week is about an article that The Guardian released, which was about top 90s games. They've put on there that it is Super Mario 64, and they've put Final Fantasy VII at number 3, which to me seems an abomination. So I'm just wondering about what you think, what your guest thinks about the top game from the 90s. Cheers, thanks.
So 15 is Monkey Island 2. Never heard of it.
I've never played it. That's it's meant to be an incredible game though. That was a PC. I think that's a point and click sort of adventure game. LucasArts, maybe. I think that was.
It is.
There you go.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah.
Gran Turismo.
Right.
So, Ellie, you would have been what, 1 or 2 then?
Who even knows? See, we don't even need to get that context on it because I played the PS1 games and all the N64 and everything as I was a child. So even though I wasn't when it was released, I've always been through the game essentially.
Yeah.
and not just that, we've kicked off, didn't we, talking about older games? So
right.
That's one of the things. Gran Turismo, I remember my dad absolutely loved it and wanted me to love it as much as him because he's well into cars. And me and Matt were talking about this prior to. The thing that frustrated me most, and Matt agrees, you had to do your driving licenses to qualify for things. It used to wind me right up. You couldn't just go in and do a race.
Yeah. I remember getting one of the Gran Turismos. I think it must have been on the PS2. I don't think it was on PS1. And again, a bit like I was talking about the sort of cutscenes and dialogue and stuff, sitting down thinking, great, I just want to get in a car and I'm just going to go around a track and it's going to be fantastic. Oh no, I've got to pass my driver's license before I can do it. It's like,
it took me long enough to do that in real life.
Exactly. I know. Hated
it. Fallout 2. Now, I've never played any of the Fallouts.
I haven't either.
I played Fallout 3, and this can make me angry as well. Because this started, Fallout 3 starts and you're in a bunker. And you have to do these certain tasks to get out the bunker. And when Fallout 3 came out, it was all hyped, and you've seen these amazing screenshots of this post-apocalyptic wasteland and stuff. Thinking, oh, that looks really cool. But I played for probably about 2 hours to get out of this bunker. And there were certain things I had to do. I got so angry, I killed everyone. And that was the way I got out. Just everyone.
Oh, no.
Couldn't cope. Yeah.
Now, I've known Matt for 10 years, and I've never known him to have rage like that.
You just convinced me that I don't want to be in a bunker with you.
No, that's it. If anyone isolates that text, he uses it against me. It's terrible.
Number 12, Resident Evil. I do remember playing it, but not a massive Resident Evil fan.
I have... Okay, so I am a certified wuss. I cannot do scary games for some reason. There is something about how tactile that experience is where it's, I get way too invested. And so scary games absolutely terrify me beyond all reason. But I love to watch gameplays of them. I've watched 2 full runs of Resident Evil Village recently because Alana Pierce did it and then Scott Johnson did it, and I was like, I have to watch it. I have to. I'll never play it, so I have to watch it. I have to know what happens. But as for playing Resident Evil, absolutely not. We'll never play.
Go on, man.
No, I was just going to say I have very fond memories of that particular one. Because
Really?
I had a PS1 and remember getting that when it came out. And remember having very fond memories of me and my friends sitting around playing that at night, particularly. And there was one bit in that game where you was in sort of an office block or something like that. And you walked and then turned right into this corridor, and you had windows to the side, and this thing comes out in the ceiling tiles. It's like this pink monster thing comes out, and God, where'd that come from?
You said pink monster, and my brain immediately went to Doom. I just immediately.
I think it was very similar. Yeah.
This would probably be one of mine if I think about the 90s. Super Mario Kart. What a game! What a game! And even on the Switch, actually. The
Mario Kart racing one's fantastic. Yeah.
Awesome.
Everyone.
You've got a Switch, Ellie?
I do indeed. It's actually right next to me. And I actually had to turn down an invitation to play Mario Kart this evening to do this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I probably wouldn't
It shows my dedication.
We appreciate it. Street Fighter 2, Matt, that's coming in at number 10. I thought that'd be higher.
But I think, like I said to you before the show, I think although Street Fighter 2 has such a cultural significance, it is still quite a niche thing. And there are lots of, I don't know, men of my age, maybe, that are probably into it quite a bit because they grew up with it and very much part of that arcade culture that doesn't necessarily exist anymore. So, yeah.
Do you think it would hold up? Like if I tried to play it now?
I think it's certainly the 2 is probably more accessible than some of the newer games, because with 4 and 5 particularly, they've added, there's a lot of sort of combination moves, and there's a lot of I can't remember what they call, like, not V skill or something. You power up a meter and then you can unleash an even more powerful move. So they've added that dynamic to it, whereas with the 2 and a lot of like the subsequent games, there's a certain amount of moves that you can learn per character.
Okay.
So once you master those moves, it's a lot easier. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Give it a try.
Yeah.
I'll run through the rest of the top 10 and then we'll kind of have an overall on this. But Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was at 9.
Yes.
Sensible World of Soccer was at number 8.
Love that. Which I was going to say, I don't think either of you played that. Have you?
I think
I've
I
never
played
heard of
Sensible
that.
Soccer. I think I did. I think that was probably
See, that was around the time when people had a Commodore Amiga, and sort of Amiga was very much a sort of a big gaming system, and it's top-down football, and these little tiny characters that you move around, and you know, as you'd play FIFA, sort of kicking the ball around, but because it was so simple, the gameplay and the actual sort of competitive element of it was just off the charts. It's just so good. It's
So
just a pure.
rightful to be in the top 10 then,
Oh,
say.
definitely. It's amazing. Yeah.
Sonic, the first one, obviously, classic game. Pokemon Red and Blue, I remember that being mega when on Game Boy, like everyone was either one or the other. And Quake, which I remember, God, what console was Quake on? I feel like I had that on PC or something like that.
Yeah, I think PC first.
Again, like Doom and things like that, wasn't it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But that was, I think, Quake was one of the Quakes was one of the first ones to introduce sort of multiplayer
Cool.
shooting each other. I can't think of the technical term for it at this moment.
Multiplayer shooting each other.
You could play other people and shoot them. Yeah, that was the feature.
And this is where Mark gets frustrated. Final Fantasy VII's in at number 4.
Right.
He thinks that should be. If I know Mark, he thinks it should be number 1. But
I think most people would agree with him that like grew up playing, because like Final Fantasy 7 or Final Fantasy as a franchise really took off at 7, and so it was a lot of people's first Final Fantasy game, and typically a person's first Final Fantasy game is like the game that means the most to them. But even just on top of that, like the love that people have for Aerith Aeris, she was in the original, is just like, you know, it knows no bounds, and I think it really became the darling of a franchise for so many reasons. So I'm surprised that it's at 4th, if I'm honest.
Well, I am when I see what the next one is. Number 3, Half-Life. I remember Half-Life. I didn't think it was that
played
good. Again, a bit like Quake, I guess. It was a first-person shooter, and yeah,
I have a hard time with first-person shooters ranking as the best games. You know, because I would define the best games based on like story or at least 100%. Like complex battle mechanics or something. Definitely. Like Horizon Zero Dawn does not have a mind-blowing story, but the battle mechanics in it make it one of the best games that's ever come out. So like, but yeah, like first-person shooter, I don't get that.
No,
me too. I mean, mainly because I'm in first-person shooters. I'm that one who you see shooting fire. Yeah, especially on like Call of Duty.
Third person.
Yeah. And then the top 2. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, which was on the N64, I think.
Yes.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant game. And then Super Mario 64. I think that's the controversy that Mark has. I don't think. I remember it being good, but I don't remember again. I think it was Probably because it was the first Mario on the 64, and it was kind of all that 3D feel.
First 3D Mario, I think, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Matt,
Big Mario World, though, for me, is like a glaring omission on that. That's a phenomenal game.
Yeah.
Trying to think of others like 90s games, Grand Theft Auto. For what it at the time is obviously a very different game for what it is now, but I think the story, the sort of concept of like the open world's almost sort of map, the fact you had radio
it was
stations,
revolutionary for its time, for sure.
completely. Yeah.
I probably agree with you there, Matt. Absolutely. Matt. Have you got one that you can think of, Ellie, or is one of them on that list?
No, I feel pretty comfortable with that list. I think it's kind of exhausted what I remember of 90s games.
Definitely. Well, let's move it on to new games that are coming in the next generation.
Right.
To move swiftly on. E3, that was last week.
Right.
Was you following it closely?
I wouldn't say closely, but I did follow it. I did try to watch a few presentations. I really made time and effort to watch the Square Enix presentation, and what a disappointment.
There
and
was
Nintendo, it was kind of just like, eh.
Yeah, I think a few people said that. I saw that online. Were there any games that stood out for you? Because there were a couple for me, and there weren't ones that would usually.
In Square Enix or Nintendo?
Just across the event.
Right. Okay. So I have to go back and watch the presentation for Kena Bridge of Spirits, because I'm very excited for that game's release. But I didn't actually get to watch that specific presentation. But I remember, I think it's Stranger in or Stranger of Paradise, that is Final Fantasy adjacent. Like it's in the general world of it, but it's not like one of the Final Fantasy games.
Yeah.
And it just looked so bizarre. Like there were a few Square Enix games that like they came out and like the trailer was just wild, and it was like I don't understand. Like I understand we went through a pandemic, but I think it would have been better if you would have just like postponed. Like maybe you didn't need a specific Square Enix conference, you know? Because some of those games really need some love. And then the Nintendo games, I just mostly didn't care about what they were releasing. And then they gave you like 40 seconds of Breath of the Wild 2, and everyone was like, it's in the sky! And so I was like, yeah, I mean, that looks cool.
Yeah. One of the things that Matt said to me earlier, and he said would be a good thing to ask, is do you worry then, and you kind of said it there with kind of the underwhelming of it, do you worry that there could be a Cyberpunk 2.0 in that one might flop massively after such, one that stands out, and this isn't the one that kind of caught my eye as much, but Starfield on Xbox, which is supposed to be this kind of
and they're certainly selling it as this, game-changing thing.
Yeah. And there is that, I feel like with Cyberpunk, like, there was that hype behind it. It'd been in the works for about 10 years, I think.
Ages, yeah.
And then it obviously had so many issues, and you just think, how can something like that end up like it did?
Yeah. I mean, it just all, I suppose it would depend on your confidence in the leadership, because, like the reason why, I mean, like Holly Bennett, she went from PlayStation Access to CD Projekt Red, and she was their like community manager. She was the reason that it was so hyped, and it was like everyone knew about this game. It's gonna be fucking incredible. And then like people had the audacity to be like, why was it hyped up so much? And like complaining about that. And I was just like, I'm sorry, you're complaining about two entirely different roles.
Yeah.
Like she did her job so fucking well, got you so excited about it.
Yeah.
And then the game was underwhelming because they had like weird issues with leadership, and they were more concerned with pushing it out at like this specific date than just doing it right. But I don't foresee a Cyberpunk 2.0 situation because of how horrendously bad that was.
Like more cautious now.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And like and CD Projekt Red, like they're like scraping by like the skin of their teeth at the moment, and it's only because of Witcher 3. Like they are riding on the coattails of whatever that success was, and like the talk that there might be a Witcher 4, so I don't foresee it. I think people will be very cautious. Like Sony Santa Monica, they said that they were postponing the release of God of War Ragnarok for 2022 or whatever. And it's obviously because of this past year, but like people are like, we support you. Please take your time.
Yeah, that's it.
You don't want a half-finished game.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, one that stood out for me was a game called Somerville, which is going to be on the Xbox.
Okay.
And again, it's one of them games where I probably previously wouldn't have paid much attention to it, but when I watched this video, I was like, this sounds incredible. It's like a post-apocalyptic scenario, and you control a family of 3, so a mum, a dad, and a little boy, and their dog.
And a dog, yeah.
And the dog.
Do you control the dog, or is it just there?
Well,
I don't know, actually.
I want that to be a mechanic. I really want to be able to explore. I want there to be a function that you have to be the dog to
now the dog.
like,
That'd be
dig
amazing.
or something.
Yeah.
But a bit like what you were saying with Disco Elysium, the visuals on this game look awesome.
Yeah.
And if you get a chance, check it out, because
I will.
for me, I think this could be, I'm not saying groundbreaking, but it could be a really interesting game. I just think the scenario, the way it looks as well, and you've got to obviously do different tasks with each member, and it's kind of in this whole setting of an apocalypse. It's it just stood out for me as one that looked a bit indie and a bit kind of, I don't know, there was something about it.
Yeah, I'm excited for probably the ones that like aren't gonna get a huge conference press release type thing, because like Disco Elysium just like, came out of the woodwork, and then the reason it's getting this resurgence is like they got the funding to do a full voiceover, and so now people are like, hang on, and I think Game Pass brought it back, and they were just like, do you want this game? And then PlayStation was like, wait, what if we get it too? So I'm very excited for like the indie uprising that we'll be getting from this as well.
100%.
Yeah.
What one stood out for you, Matt?
For me, it was, actually, I surprised myself in a way. It's probably quite the opposite to that. Normally, I'm, looking for those little gems, but Battlefield 2042, seeing the trailer for that, and a bit like James said, I'm useless at sort of, third-person shooters or whatever. I try my best, and it's probably been, I think it was Call of Duty Black Ops 2 or something. It was the last one I played. So
one of the 97 Black Ops. Yeah.
Yeah, a long while ago. And thoroughly enjoyed it, but sort of fell out of love with that genre. But they've added things like weather. So you're in the middle of a battle and a tornado comes in and destroys everything. So, there's damage from that weather and things like that. And it just looks insane. I think but again, hopefully it's not a style over substance situation, but if they get that right and you're thinking, wow, I've got to do this before that, gets to us. And, wow. Yeah, that'll be phenomenal. And Forza Horizon 5, which I
didn't even hear of that.
Oh, that is set in the 4, which I've played a lot of. And my boys are playing a lot of at the moment. We're set in the UK, and it was just stunning, like the English countryside and everything. This one's set in Mexico, and so you've got all the desert terrain and things like that, and it just looks, I don't know, you just can't describe how good it looks.
Visually, it's stunning.
Visually, it's just ridiculous. And that's a game I have a lot of confidence in, because I know how good the current one is. I just don't think they can mess it up. I probably shouldn't say this because they'll probably ruin it, but
touch wood.
I don't think they can mess it up.
Those are bold statements.
100%. Yeah. Well, that's the future of gaming. What to round up this show? What is the future for Ellie?
Oh, what is the future for Ellie? Writing, putting together that portfolio. I'm quite new in the job that I'm in. I'm only a month in now, but I feel like I feel acclimatized, it doesn't feel so much like an uphill battle, so I'll be able to start churning out articles and stuff more frequently. But yeah, I mean, the future for me is just like lots of writing, trying to digest as much gaming as possible for the next year or so before I would submit an application to a gaming studio. But I live completely unbeknownst to me and my partner, I live 5 minutes away from Romero Game Studio, like John Romero of Doom, Brenda Romero.
Really?
Like, I live 5 minutes away from that
Awesome.
studio. And I was like, I'm sorry, you went from LA to just live in this random part in Ireland? Like, you
That's
just
insane.
No, you're
you
not.
decided to found a AAA studio in the west coast of Ireland? Like, what happened here?
John.
He'd be like, oh, it's so good to see you. Hi, Brenda. Yeah, but I'm going to try to weasel my way into that company, probably.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well,
That's
when
too
you
good an
do,
opportunity to miss, isn't it?
well, I was
Yeah.
going to say, and when you do, don't forget little old us, and you can come on and tell us all about it. But where can our listeners and our viewers find you?
So I am Red Ellie Gamer everywhere. That's REDELLIEGMR. You can go to redelliegamer.com, or you can, and that will link to all of my social media and my articles and videos on YouTube and everything. And you can join my community Discord if you like. But yeah, I mean, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, I'm Red Ellie Gamer. So you can find me in all those places.
Awesome. We will put all the links in the description. But for now, Ellie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. Don't forget, if you did enjoy it, please like, subscribe on whatever platform you're watching and listening on, because then that way you won't miss out on any future episodes we put out.
Yeah, and don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms as well. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and give us a follow, and you'll be able to keep up to date with all of the latest episodes and posts that we put out there. But thank you for listening and watching.
And we'll see you next episode.